Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you for joining us for this next exciting session on study design and diversity, the need for increased representation across clinical trials to ensure inclusivity for the patient and the caregiver. This panel discussion will be led by Lorena Curry, who is actually our Global Head for Diversity Strategy at BMS. I thank you so much for participating, panelists. Additionally, please use the chat area to post any questions or comments you have. We'll be monitoring that so that we can share those questions at the end of the session. Lorena?
Thank you, Candace. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. I need to be totally transparent with you. Right now, I am filling in because Roslyn Daniels, the head president and CEO of Black Health Matters, has been having some difficulties, but I think that we are all in this same environment right now, and we are understanding that this is flexible. But it also speaks very well of the collaboration that we need to have as partners, as stakeholders, and as actors in the clinical trials journey of our patients, because we're all in this together, and we need to make sure that we feel each other and we stand up for each other. So today I am super happy because we have an amazing roundup of panelists. If everyone is okay, I would like to take some time to briefly introduce you, and then I will give your respective time from your presentation before we go to question and answers. So first of all, we have Professor Ruben Mesa. He is currently the director of the UT Health San Antonio. He's in the MD Anderson Cancer Center. His interests include myeloproliferative neoplasms and hematologic malignancies. He's led the development of the NCCN guidelines for myelofibrosis, polycythemia vera, and essential thrombocythemia. And he has been principal and co-principal investigator of over 70 clinical trials. And he was elected to the National Board of Directors of Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And he is on the board of the MPN Education Foundation. Welcome, Professor Mesa.
Thank you.
Then we have our friend Dan Milam, and I said our friend because with Dan, we have been working with SCRS as strategic partners. He is the Vice President for Global Engagement at SCRS, with over 20 years of experience working in the pharmaceutical, CRO, and site sectors. Dan has gained wide perspective and understanding of the needs of industry as a whole that aids to facilitate and build strong alliances. He focuses on expanding SCRS global footprint and in the inclusion of all the industry stakeholders in SCRS initiatives to foster sustainability for clinical research. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you for having me.
And our other panelist is Cassandra Smith, well known in the diversity in clinical trial space. She is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion in Clinical Trials at the Janssen Pharmaceutical Company of Johnson & Johnson. She is also leading the collaborative group that we're working with other stakeholders in the pharma industry with sponsors and CROs to make things happen. And since March, I would say, early before March, she has been constantly advocating for more diversity in clinical trials. And I must say, she's a trailblazer and has done a fantastic job. Thank you, Cass, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Lorena.
Okay. Well, thank you. I understand that now we will go to a couple of presentations, short 10-minute slides that each of you have. So if it makes sense, I would like to hand it over to Professor Mesa, who will be sharing about the science and the unmet medical need behind diversity in clinical trials. So, floor is yours, Professor Mesa. Hi, Rosalie. Sorry, I just saw her.
No worries, no worries.
Okay.
Thank you. So where shall I jump in?
I've just introduced our esteemed panelists, and now Professor Mesa will present his slides. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I will disappear now.
Perfect. Well, if I'm doing this correctly, you're seeing my slides. You're able to see this okay?
Yes, we can see them. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, first, I'm really glad to be here today. You know, this topic is incredibly important. And I think the COVID-19 crisis, has raised the awareness really in the general population on how important this topic really is. I mean, historically, you know, issues such as this have been felt to be more in the realm of social justice? Is it equitable? Is it fair? Are these trials an opportunity for people to participate? But I think what the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us is a much greater awareness of clinical trials and their importance for our entire population. When I try to relate to folks an analogy in terms of why is it important that our clinical trials represent the population of people who will be receiving the therapy, I'll use the COVID-19 example. So let's say we had a vaccine and we knew it was effective, but it had only been tested in Iceland. And based on that data alone, we would be using it around the world. Would we have any confidence that that would be effective in all of our populations and areas? And would we be confident that there would not be an unexpected side effect from a drug that had been tried in a group of individuals that was very distinct from potentially who you are, both genetically and geographically? And indeed, that is the core reason why diversity in clinical trials is crucial. Are a therapy safe and effective for the people we're actually going to be using that therapy for? Without question, there is the additional incredibly important component of it being fair for individuals to be able to participate in clinical trials, to have access to the newest lines of therapy. Now, let me tell you a little bit about our center and some of the lessons that we've learned to contribute to this discussion. We are the Mays Cancer Center at UT Health San Antonio MD Anderson. We're based in San Antonio, and our catchment area as an NCI designated cancer center is San Antonio and South Texas. This is a minority majority community, 69% Hispanic, of an overall population of about 4.9 million people, with an area roughly the size of Pennsylvania, with many challenging and unique population characteristics in terms of Spanish as a primary language for almost half, in terms of social determinants of health, in terms of increased rates of poverty or less education. And indeed, our patients who are treated for cancer in our center are the majority are minorities and Hispanics, and there are many challenges they face that are very relevant to the area of clinical trials. That said, we have had as an important part of our mission to really focus on how do clinical trials as a core part of how we seek to make a difference in cancer, both for the broader cancer community, but also as a resource for our community. How do we have these trials really be a resource for all of our patients? So we pulled together groups over the years with significant leadership from many. In particular, I would note Dr. Emily Ramirez, a member of the National Academy of Medicine, who is our Associate Director for Community Outreach and Engagement at the Mays Cancer Center. And we've identified barriers, and there are many. They're just not economic. There's transportation, there's language barriers, there can be cultural barriers. We've worked to develop a minority accrual plan that has many aspects in terms of provider education, in terms of community outreach, in terms of individuals having a more positive potential view on clinical research before they come into our centers. We developed this minority accrual plan for each individual trial and helped to populate an investigator toolbox that includes many things, including, of course, outstanding translations and translations that actually are appropriate for the degree of both health literacy and cultural competence with individuals who might potentially participate in those studies. And with this, we had over 52% of our patients placed on clinical trials are minority patients, of which 48% are Hispanic and Latino. And we currently have 16 actively accruing studies with greater than 75% Hispanic or Latino enrollment. I don't call it out because it's a non-cancer issue, but it's equally relevant that many of these lessons we've learned, we used with the ACT study, which is the anti-COVID study done at our university. And there we were one of the leading accruing study sites in the United States with over 150 patients that were enrolled, of which 85% were Latino patients. Critical in that we have seen the overrepresentation of Hispanic patients in our community in terms of acquiring the COVID-19 infection. Now, I'll share with you just a couple of high-level comments in terms of some of the lessons that we've learned. So first, doctors continue to be a very trusted source of health information and advice amongst Latinos. So we have learned a variety of things. One, there was to some degree a preconceived bias, sometimes even amongst Latino physicians, that Latinos may be less inclined to participation in clinical trials. Overall, we have found that this is not true, and that part of it is demystifying the process, part of it is adequate discussion and health education, part of it is understanding the family dynamics. Indeed, this is a very family-oriented community, and we've recognized that in each family there tends to be a recognized health expert. This may be a pharmacist who works at CVS, this may be a nurse, this might be anyone involved in healthcare. It could be a respiratory technician. But whomever that person is, it is crucial that they really be involved in both the discussion of the health of that individual, particularly in the circumstance of a serious illness, as well as in discussion of a clinical trial. If we expect Abuela to potentially enroll in a clinical trial, if her health expert, Enrique, the respiratory technician at the hospital, is not involved in that discussion, she's not likely to participate. And if she participates, she's not likely to participate in an accurate or compliant fashion. So that is an incredibly important part. Next, we have explored a variety of interventions that really are around communication, whether it be online videos, whether it be use of promotoras, whether it be use of meetings, live events at churches, working with community partners that both deal with that pre-clinical trial period. In other words, the greater the awareness that clinical trials are a positive force for improving healthcare, the more receptive individuals will be when confronted with a clinical trial option in accordance with their care. So I would say that overall, our experience has been very positive. And our goal is that the individuals that are on the critical trials that we are involved with, whether they be in cancer prevention, cancer screening, active therapy, or survivorship, that they be reflective of our populations. And the crucial reason for this is both biology as well as culture. Biology, there may be different rates of development of a disease. There may be different response to therapy. There may be different pharmacogenomics in terms of how a therapy is metabolized that might make it either more or less effective, more or less toxic. We realize there are many cultural aspects that also weigh into this. First, adequate understanding with accurate translation, but also cultural aspects as it relates to even the discussion of diseases like cancer, the preconception of prevention and screening, the discussion and communication of toxicities, as well as end-of-life care planning, palliative medicine, and supportive care. So all of this is about providing the very best care that we can for all of our patients. There are lessons that are learned from our minority patients that are applicable to majority populations and vice versa. Some of the lessons we've learned, I look forward to hearing from our other panelists and hearing your questions. Thank you.
Roslyn?
Yes, hi. Okay, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Dr. Mesa. That was very, very interesting. I have to say, it looks like you're building a culture of health in your area. So I definitely want to ask you more questions about that. And now we have Dan Milam. And Dan, could you speak to us about a little bit about your background and about, what the role of your organization is as an important place where kind of you're on the front lines as well in helping increase diversity in clinical trials.
Absolutely. And I'd like to thank you for having me, and Lorena and BMS for inviting me to speak. Let me go ahead and open up my presentation. Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Milam, Vice President of Global Engagement with the Society for Clinical Research Sites. And just to give you a quick background on SCRS, and SCRS was founded in 2012 in response to a growing need for a trade organization to represent the needs of the clinical sites globally. So to date, we represent nearly 10,000 sites across 47 countries. And the mission is to unify the voice of the global clinical research site community for greater site sustainability. And we do this through a number of ways. And the 4 pillars here on the screen really detail those out: to educate, to advocate, to mentor, and connect the sites, and to be the voice of the site with the industry. And so a number of ways that we do this is through various initiatives. And the one that we'll talk about today is our Diversity Awareness Program. And the Diversity Awareness Program was founded and formed in 2017 and was created to support the efforts by clinical research sites to meet the goals of the FDA's action plan. The goal is to educate, inform, and heighten the awareness of the importance of establishing best practices of diverse trial enrollment and support to the clinical research site. And we do this through a number of ways. We conduct a number of diversity-specific webinars through SCRS. We participate in a number of webinars outside, much like this one today, and also through the development and validation of what we're titling the Diversity Site Assessment Tool. And this is an ongoing research project that is coming to an end. We're very excited about that. And I want to share just a little bit about that tool in just a little bit. And of course, our program is sponsored and partnered with many of the inside the industry. And so our working group and those on the call today and in this group, Lorena and Cassandra, who will speak in just a little bit, are part of our working group. And also Bristol Myers Squibb, who will soon be added to this list, as how we're forming partnerships and collaborations across the industry to help raise awareness and help sites to enroll patients of diverse populations. So our first paper released on diversity awareness was in 2017, and which illuminated key aspects of inclusion of diverse patient populations. And from there, in July 2018, after we formed the working group with the industry collaborations, as I mentioned in the slide before, we started to develop with the industry a diversity site assessment checklist. And this checklist was designed as a yes and no type of answer, about 30 questions to start, and to help the sites to determine what are their best practices to identifying diverse populations. Are they enrolling diverse populations? Is there standard operating procedures and other initiatives at their sites focusing on finding those diverse populations around their site and in their community? So through the years, with this has developed, and most recently in June 2020, we released the pilot study to give the validation of this checklist, and the results were published as part of a number of surveys that we conducted with the SCRS and within the site community. And the subject of the clinical, a subset of the clinical sites who answered the survey were interviewed to further validate the questions and the responses to ensure that the wording met the understanding of the sites. So furthermore, statistical analysis was used to calculate the agreement that the statement that was included in the site assessment would best meet the best practices that sites are using to enroll diverse populations. And so we're excited that through this, we're able to further build and validate a scientific scoring process for sites to use, which we're calling this diversity site assessment tool. So in our final test, the final phase of this 4-year study of this diversity site assessment tool, we conducted a survey from May to July this year, receiving over 400 responses from sites. And there were basically 3 sections to the diversity site assessment tool, the DSAT as we call it. The site overview, how do they see diversity and how are they assessing diversity overall within their research site recruitment outreach. Do they know the communities around them, the diverse populations around them, whether there's a Hispanic population or a Korean population just outside their back door or front door? Are they reaching those patients to enroll into their studies? And then also patient-focused services. And do they have plans in place to meet the patient's needs, meet their concerns, and address those concerns at visits? And we are in the process of editing or analyzing, these results now and developing the paper for this. And so I know I covered a lot of this information quickly, but just to leave some time for discussion later and with the other members in this group. But where are we at now? So the diversity site assessment tool is a major milestone for the SCRS and this diversity awareness program with our industry partners. And where we are at now is we've conducted our final research on this tool. We are in the process of creating a statistical analysis to create a scoring tool to where sites can then analyze their responses against other sites within their community around the world, and how do they compare as far as identifying diverse populations and actually practicing the enrollment of diverse populations. So we're very excited about the steps that we're in. And actually this October, and here in just a couple of weeks, we will be releasing the tool in the final paper that accompanies this tool, the final research paper. So we look forward to that, and we invite many of you to visit our website at myscrs.org here in the coming weeks for the final tool to be available. And if you're a site that is on this call, we encourage you to take this tool and evaluate your own practices to see how you're doing, how your site is reaching out and conducting the outreach, your best practices insight. And if you're part of the industry, whether an advocacy group or pharmaceutical or CRO that is on the call, we encourage you to incorporate this tool and at least help to build your diversity and diversity assessments during your feasibility process. And with that, I want to thank Roslyn. Thank you again for having me a part of this call and BMS, and I will turn it back over to you. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you. Oh, I'm excited. So we'll have to stay in touch so that we can see this tool when it's released, your white paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I hope there's a mechanism, I guess, for us all to have the website. So if you wanted to say it as right before we conclude, so that we can go there when we can download it when it's available.
Absolutely.
All right, great. And now I'm going to introduce you all to Cassandra Smith from Janssen, who is really taking on the world with her enthusiasm and passion for clinical diversity. So please share with us your thoughts and insights on all the good work that Janssen is doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roslyn. So I'm just pulling up my slides. Let's see. All right, just a second. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Oh, okay, so thank you so much, Roslyn, for the introduction and really kind words. It's this is my day job, but it's also very much so a passion of mine. So I will never I have yet, maybe I'll say it that way, run out of energy for discussing this topic, really working on this topic. So thank you so much, Lorraine, and to the BMS team for having me present today. So my talk is going to be focused around the importance of collaboration in this time. It's critically important that in a time like no other, you know, we're looking outside of our own organizations to figure out how can we be working with other key stakeholders, patients, caregivers, sites, other industry colleagues, community members, et cetera, to really help drive diversity and inclusion in trials. So I'm just going to, just a couple quick slides that I wanted to share with you. So, you know, as we heard from Dr. Mesa earlier, you know, the time really is now for us to act on this. So COVID-19, as we all know, it is the prevalent conversation around the globe. There's no, you know, health matter more important than solving the COVID-19, or rather ending the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, you know, what COVID has done has really placed clinical research and clinical trials and health disparities in the mainstream in a way that I'm not sure that it ever really has. I don't know that, you know, households ever had clinical trials, you know, roll off of their lips and, you know, in conversation at the dinner table, et cetera, and the way that we are now. So this is a very unique time for us to start to, you know, make sure that we're educating people around clinical research, getting the correct and accurate information out, and really leaning on the expertise that each of the stakeholders bring. So this is something that is just, you know, really important. And it's nice to see there is more collaboration, but I think, you know, there are a few things that industry specifically can do in, you know, kind of looking at other sources of collaboration to really drive this. So a couple considerations, I guess, for us to think about. And again, Dr. Mesa, you set this up perfectly for me. It wasn't rehearsed. But, you know, there are quite a few considerations for why we don't have greater diversity in our clinical trials. And so, you know, this is, if I had to be forced to bucket, where do I see some of the larger issues? And again, there are many other issues. Some are controllable, some not so controllable. But you know, we can bucket them to access to care and competing demands, both from the site perspective, but also from people. You know, a lot of times clinical research is conducted during business, you know, working hours, and that makes it very difficult for people to participate and really balance that, as well as, you know, sites, our HCPs are, you know, extremely busy running trials, seeing patients, et cetera. So that's one of the reasons. Another thing too that we can't, you know, dismiss is that sites, you know, all sites don't have access to diverse slates of patients. So it's a really intentional effort that we as industry need to take in order to make sure that we're enrolling or engaging the right sites with the right patient populations for our studies. And that includes, you know, sometimes looking outside of the traditional site as we, you know, consider and going with other kinds of sites or types of sites that we wouldn't, you know, naturally or normally think about. We also talked a little or heard a little bit earlier about language and literacy barriers, and specifically, I mean, health literacy barriers. So again, I think COVID has shown how there is room for improvement to really make sure that people understand, you know, more about their health, more about clinical research, and giving them the right information so that they know how to decipher and discern what's for them. Language is also a key thing that is critically important. So we do need to make sure that we are providing access to information in native language and a language that's comfortable for people to speak, and also that we're using simplified language. We're not, you know, talking in very complex terms. So that's another thing that has to really be done to make sure that we're attracting and engaging diverse patient populations. But the really very big elephant in the room that I think, again, COVID has just spotlighted across the US specifically is mistrust. And this is something that we've heard of, we know about, we know it exists, and I think through collaborations and partnerships, we can get past it. So how might we do this? So one of the things that I can't underestimate again is for industry to be very intentional with how we're selecting our sites, where we're selecting sites. So a couple things that, again, I think we can do is look at the diversity of the principal investigators and research sites. So I think Dr. Mesa, made a really excellent point earlier on, talking about how it's important for trusted voices to be part of the clinical research enrollment and retention, site or retention practice. And so it's really important that we are making sure we have a strong network of sites that are able to have, commitment and connection rather to diverse populations. Critically important. The other thing too is there a way that we can connect with community healthcare professionals a little bit more? So even if we don't select sites that have diverse patients that come to see them as clinicians, is there a way that we can bridge the gap with other community healthcare professionals to drive traffic to those sites, engage their patients, educate their patients around clinical research? That's critically important. And another thing, which I think is a bit lower hanging fruit, but still it's something where there's lots of room for opportunity, is meeting patients where they are. I mean, physically where they are. So is it possible that we could engage trial sites that are actually located where underrepresented communities actually seek care? Again, it might be a bit of a difference in thinking about the model that we use typically in research, but I think it certainly can be done. The last thing that I think is, or maybe not last, but also equally important thing, is engagement. And so this is something that we have to do. Again, I think COVID has really amplified the need for us to be engaging with partners that are trusted within communities. It's not always that, we as industry, sponsors, the community trusts us. That's not really true. They will trust, their abuela, as Dr. Mesa said, or their auntie or their cousin, or even the healthcare professional they've been seeing forever and ever and ever, their pharmacist, et cetera. But the message around clinical trials and the importance of diversity must come from these trusted voices with us, kind of in partnership. So this is maybe again a little bit of a difference in thinking that we have to transfer, some of the message that we want to get outside of it coming from us, but really, seeking and leveraging trusted voices. And this has to be, I can't say this enough either, for the long term. It is not a good practice to, kind of swoop in and engage with people, connect with community, start to build relationships. And then once your trial is over, you swoop out and you're on to the next thing. It has to be, I think, an ever growing and evolving relationship that we're trying to build. People really can feel when it's inauthentic and it's for, a self-serving purpose. So we have to, make sure that we are getting out and we're establishing these relationships for the long haul. The other thing I guess I'll mention here is around disrupting information. So this is something that I think we see quite prominently in the wake of COVID-19 and all of the information that's out there swirling. So it is critically important that we make it our business to, yes, we want to have diversity in our clinical trials, but we have to make sure that we're providing correct and accurate information sources and actively disrupting misinformation. So there's like kind of two things. It's, getting the right word out, but then also, head on really tackling the plethora of misinformation that's out there. Critically important. And again, utilizing trusted voices in the community through HCPs that are trusted or through other providers in the community that are trusted is really a great way to go. So there's a lot more, I think, that Roslyn, you'll dive into in the Q&A session, but just wanted to share some high-level thoughts about, it's really, really important that we have that kind of collaboration that we've not always seen, but that we really need to see moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Cassandra.
My pleasure.
So
Sure.
We do have a couple of questions from the audience. So one question is from Dr. Mesa. Can you let us know if there is someone in the clinical site staff at Mays CC that has responsibility for community outreach?
It's an excellent question, and it is crucial, I think, that someone be identified in an institution to really have this as a priority and always have on their radar. So certainly at our center, we have a number of individuals under a whole community outreach and engagement office, that do everything from keep track of enrollments and the minority accrual plans per trial, as well as Dr. Ramirez and her staff that really kind of help to set the tone. So that includes a variety of things. That includes awareness in overrepresented cancers that are disproportionately affecting our population. So we could say that liver cancer, pediatric leukemias, gastric cancer, and others, we might have higher rates of involvement in these cancers in Hispanic patients, and how do we have trials and other things to really try to address those. We also can see that there can be cancers where the prevalence and incidence look similar, but the outcomes can be worse in trying to understand them. So again, we have identified that in acute leukemia patients, we don't have a higher incidence, but the outcomes have been worse. And we are actively trying to figure out, is that biology? I mean, do they present with more adverse features or genetic mutations? Or are they presenting for antibiotic care late if they have neutropenic fever? So many different parts to unravel, but we have a whole team really tasked with helping us keep track of these things. I do think a center, even if it's not a full FTE at a center, it is crucial that that really be someone's job to really have this as a priority.
Excellent, excellent. One of my questions is, your institution obviously is revered, and I did hear the affiliation with MD Anderson. What happens if you are more of a scrappy community hospital? Will we see the same type? And of course, they wouldn't necessarily have a Dr. Mesa, but would we see similar outcomes? What kind of advice would you be able to share with an organization, a medical organization that may not have all of the infrastructure to help them set strategy and ideas so that they too can recruit more people for clinical trials?
Well, I think we are all part of a broader team, where again, I think there are many resources and many passionate individuals to really help you kind of achieve that mission. So that can be through partnerships with other kind of designated cancer centers that all kind of share this as a mission, with resources from the National Cancer Institute, there are a variety of clinical trial networks that can be helpful. I do think there is much greater awareness and engagement from our colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry than on this topic. I think for all of these reasons, both coming from their own individual passion and realization of the importance of this issue, as well as evolving mandate really from the FDA in terms of the importance of our clinical trials really reflecting our populations. So I'd say, if you're caring for these patients, there are resources and probably willing partners that are there to help you try to achieve that.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question from the audience. Dan, are there any early observations from your survey that you can share with us?
Dan, I think your mic is muted.
All right, I tell you what, while Dan is working to get his mic fixed, we have a question for Cassandra. Cassandra, can you share examples of what types of approaches or things that are being done in underserved communities to disrupt misinformation? There are strong conspiracy theories that fuel fear of participation in clinical trials.
Yes. So this is an excellent question, and why I why specifically now I chose to focus on mistrust as one of the biggest barriers that I think we're seeing. Not that it wasn't always here, because it's always, you know, been here, but I think now it is rearing its ugly head in a way that I've just not seen before, with all of the swirl of information. So the approach that we're taking, and this is you know, very a personal opinion, but I think you combat misinformation with, you know, accurate information. But again, it's who delivers that message that's really important. So I can say for Janssen, we actually just kicked off, or are just kicking off, I guess I should say, an education campaign aimed at, you know, kind of combating the misinformation and misunderstanding about clinical research that's out there. So we just launched a website called Research Includes Me, that this is the first iteration. There, you know, we're already on like version 2 to come, and how, you know, we can make this a source of information about clinical research aimed at, you know, all patients, but certainly with some of the considerations that minority patients, diverse patients have a concern about. But I think, you know, so there's that. I think providing more information to combat it, but in a very thoughtful way as well. So it's not just, you know, putting information out there and kind of walking away, but enabling the conversation, enabling people to walk up, you know, to you. And I know any lawyers may be, you know, cringing on this, or compliance folks, but this is how we get to a better understanding, is through dialogue, letting people ask the questions. So, you know, if it's Tuskegee, which always comes up every time we have an external engagement with the public about clinical research, Tuskegee comes up. So let people tell you what they know about Tuskegee, what their issues are, where the mistrust is coming from. So you can have a dialogue and hope to, you know, share a little bit more about Tuskegee and what happened after Tuskegee in terms of regulations and laws that we now have in place. So that's just one example, but I think that's important.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Mesa.
No, I just wanted to chime in. I think Cassandra brings in really an excellent point, one that I hadn't made before, but is the importance really diversity within the diversity we're speaking of. You know, I previously was at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, and there we also cared for many patients who were Native Americans. And the history, the cultural pieces, as well as the mistrust, very different. You know, and critically different, that really each population, you know, has many potential contributors. You know, I'm highly fearful that the politicized nature of the trials regarding COVID, you know, might inadvertently kind of contribute to that, you know, that piece further. I think it's crucial, you know, as I share with our investigators, that the degree of transparency that we have to have is very, very high, you know, and possible even involving kind of key stakeholders from those communities on data safety monitoring boards, on other ways of monitoring trials, so that they really both understand the process and kind of internally can share their level of comfort with that is key. I know Ned Sharpless has worked very closely with the Association of Black Churches to, again, try to further advance the understanding, kind of demystifying and trying to build trust around, you know, cancer clinical trials. But all of this is crucial, and it's also very, very fragile. You know, so that's why it's crucial that I hope we really not have any episodes that evolve as it relates to our shared pandemic that causes us to lose any ground on this key topic.
Agreed. Thank you. Now, Dan, do we have audio?
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
We sure can. All right.
Quick.
So we had a question about, would you be able to give us a preview of some of the highlights of your study?
Yeah, so the results will be coming out, and I don't have the specifics for you now, but if you go, I saw that Candace did share a link to our website, which does contain a link to the actual white paper that started the diversity site assessment tool assessment, the study. We have seen through basically the research, that the survey that we recently completed really just clarifies and solidifies, I guess I should say, the questionnaire and the responses, so that we can actually draw together a score to actually give to sites to say, this is how you compare this on a scale of 1 to 5, and through a scoring system, how you compare on how you're addressing or finding subjects, down to what are your phone prompts, your language of your informed consent, the diversity makeup within your clinic, and other aspects of standard operating procedures. So that will be coming out soon. So no specific percentages yet, but we have, through this latest survey, we've been able to, the accuracy and the deviation of the data is looking really good to give us a really strong tool for sites to assess themselves.
And are they very enthusiastic about taking it, or are they like, oh no, maybe we'll take it next year? It's too much going on in the political years. There's all of this unrest. Do they welcome an opportunity to take this survey to assess their proficiency?
Yeah, so the sites that I've really dove into and talked to about this, they are excited from different aspects of self-learning. There's one of our working group members, Dr. Fabian Sandoval of the DC area. He often brings an analogy how he was talking to a site that they were doing really good with enrollment, but they did not know about the Korean population that was just in the neighborhood behind them that could have really added to the diversity of their makeup, but because they were so focused on just getting that next patient. And so a lot of sites, especially now, are focusing on expanding their enrollment. And it's great to see that the pharmaceutical industry is pushing that message forward as well, because over the years, coming from the pharmaceutical background myself, there was always in the protocol where we talk, hey, we need to enroll more of a diverse population or a certain segment, but yet the numbers were not strict and it wasn't a certain percentage. And so sites, with the business aspect, but humanity aspect as well, they would enroll the patients that they could get. And so this gives sites an opportunity now to assess, are they finding all the patients around them that whether it's a diverse population or not, do they know their populations around them? So at least gives them an opportunity to investigate what are their practices and what is their community like, and to ensure that they're enrolling those patients. And we've heard a lot of enthusiasm, especially from the CROs and pharmaceutical companies, and to really have, now that this gives them an opportunity to kind of have a tool to add to their feasibility assessments, to be able to help them guide sites and guide their feasibility teams to identify sites, especially if they're looking for those diverse populations for a specific indication or a drug or study that's coming up.
Excellent. That's exciting. Very exciting. Good. That's great. I have a question for Cassandra. As you go into community, and again, community partners are so important because, as Lorena said, as you was shared, it's all about the messenger. How do you identify which are good community partners that are going to offer you, that are going to deliver on what they've promised?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and it's timely because I have to be honest. The way that I look at it is, so I know I work for a pharmaceutical company, and I know that there's a high degree, if we're being very honest with you, of mistrust within of our industry, especially now. And so every community partner honestly is not going to doesn't believe in this. They also have some mistrust. So I think it's understanding the organizations that understand, or you can help understand what clinical research is about, why diversity in the participants is important, and then figuring out how to work together. It's really challenging. Like, there's one organization that I really wanted to work with, but they did not necessarily, they weren't pro research. I guess I'll put it that way. They were not pro clinical research. And so it's like you have to be honest about who it is that, you know, is your tribe, so to speak, that can help you with delivering the message. So that's one thing. I think the other thing too is that, you know, I know at Janssen we really like to work with organizations that where there's a shared goal and a shared mission. So it's really important that we find those organizations that you know, believe in their heart, you know, kind of the same way that, like, I believe in my heart, this is ingrained in me, that can go out and carry that message, because that's what's going to really get us to a better and elevated conversation around this. It has to be fact driven, of course, but it also has to be patience and grace that we're giving as people are trying to, you know, come up. So it's kind of a combination.
And it also sounds like it's somewhat intuitive. You have to kind of something in your gut that organization has to speak to you on some level.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I mean, you know, of course, all the due diligence work that, you know, finding out how do they operate and all of that. But this is very much so, I think, bringing people along, and it's uncomfortable, I think, for everybody in some cases.
Okay. All right. Do we have time for one more question, Lorena? Or are we at time?
We are at time, Roslyn, but it's been fantastic to have you all here sharing with us this afternoon. So, Candace, I think Candace still is on mute, but if anyone else has more questions, please feel free to stay after or send notes. The recordings will be available 30 days after this conversation, and reach out to us. Thank you so much. I've already seen, Professor Mesa, that you're posting on social media, but continue doing so. Dan, thank you. Cass, we're looking forward to working and collaborating with you, and you've been fantastic. So please stay tuned. We're back at 3 o'clock, if I recall correctly. Okay, so thank you.
Sorry, I'm delayed.